Hi everyone, it's good to see you all here. I know quite a few of you, and it's really good to have a kind of really broad discussion that I think we're going to have. And we've been having a little bit of a chat about 5G and its kind of place in the audio world before we started the call. And I think there's going to be some really interesting discussion points coming up. I am going to do the obligatory PowerPoint thing because it's kind of my job to introduce you to a lot of the work that we've been doing. So if you'll forgive me for a second, I am just going to hopefully share this set of slides, so hopefully you'll all see that. I've badged this as the 5G Media Action Group. So 5G Mag is a group of kind of media people who are kind of representing the media industry into the 5G industry, and I chair the content production technology working group, but also content distribution and commercial groups and all that kind of stuff. And I'll speak a little bit more about that earlier. But let me just take you through the story. So many years ago, when I first started working at the BBC, when we did OBs, it was all analog, and wireless links were great, but they were big, they were cumbersome, but they kind of did the job. And this is the same really for audio and video. So video, we had about 4 channels that we could get in a 7 gigahertz thing. For audio, maybe any more than 9 radio mics became a problem. Then we get to video, and we start to be able to kind of get a lot more signals in and a lot more bang for our buck and a lot more flexibility out of our solutions, and the solutions got smaller and they got better and they got quicker over time. But now we're in this kind of migration point where we're moving to IP. So we're starting to think about AES-67.
Ian, sorry yes. to interrupt, but it's in
center view.
Oh, is it in the wrong mode? Let me do a bit of that then. Thanks for.
Here we go.
I never know which monitor I'm on. The beauty of Zoom. That's it. Good. Right. So now we're in IP. And we've got things like AES-67 and NDI and SMPTE 2110. And as we move to more kind of cloud-based workflows and things like that, we need to start looking at new solutions that kind of enable us to kind of really see the benefit of IP. And we're seeing that in our wired solutions. So what do our wireless solutions look like? But I think it's important to say it's not just us. The mobile industry has been through a kind of similar piece, and they've been kind of working on sort of digital and IP technologies for quite a while now, and they've almost overtaken us. So we're starting to see this kind of convergence of what we can do with in the broadcasting domain to what's going on in the mobile world. So we're exploring that really quite heavily. But then there's another factor we need to take into account as well, which is spectrum. And this is a Qualcomm slide, which is I find quite interesting because it kind of highlights the fact that different elements of spectrum are going to be available to us in the future. And some of this is an opportunity. So there's some stuff up in the millimeter wave space up here, and you can see US and Canada doing lots of stuff with millimeter wave. Moreover, in Europe, we're doing a lot of stuff in the 700 megahertz and the 3.4 to 3.5, the mid-band space. But where the challenge lies for us is a lot of this is also what we use for what we call program making and special event, PMSE spectrum. So we're slightly concerned that, you know, as we move away from digital terrestrial television, we might see that spectrum becoming available. That is spectrum we currently use in Europe for radio mics. As we move away from some of the mid-band stuff, that's stuff we use for video PMSE as well. So we've got some concerns in that space. So when we look at that, we've got the move to IP, and we've got these spectrum questions, which means we should really explore 5G. And we'll get one of 2 answers. Either it's good enough and we'll adopt the technologies, or it doesn't work, and then that gives us the case to maintain our existing infrastructure. But we can't go to our regulators and say, hey, we need to maintain all of this workflow if we can't prove that we haven't explored other areas. So to get there, doing loads of work. These are just some groups that a number of us on this call are involved in. There's work in the EBU. There's work in 5G Mag that I mentioned earlier. We're doing work with IBC. So Mario, Matt, and myself have all been involved in projects around there. We've got EU-funded projects that a few of us are involved in, different projects that are looking at different areas of 5G. And then we're doing standards work as well. And I should just say it's not just one size fits all. So we're looking at different production types. So the big tier 1 things, the studio shows, the Olympics, for us, the proms, the World Cup, these are challenging for us because they're they're big and they're have high prestigious values, and there's often contractual and statutory obligations around them. But on the other hand, they're usually really well planned. But there's quite a lot of international interest. Audio is usually a separate workflow, but we need to kind of think about actually the challenges that we've got within the audio domain specifically, alongside what we're doing with video. Then we've got our tier 2 events. So these are the stuff that these are the really strong candidates for remote productions. They're typically maybe Heats events or the cultural events like comedy festivals and music festivals. Quite often they're done with in-house production, simpler setups, but they're kind of traditionally hard to justify or cover because the audiences might not be as large. And then finally we've got our news colleagues, and those tend to be unplanned, a lot of in-house, but they need to be scalable. And then we also in here we include things like radio and radio news and stuff like that. But quite often at these big events, it's not just one of these things that happens. It's at an Olympics you'll have some tier 3, some tier 1, some tier 2 things going on. So you need to kind of work out about how you pull all that together. So what are we doing? We're engaging with 3GPP. 3GPP are the standards bodies that are looking after the mobile industry. We've done quite a bit of work. We about 2 years ago, we started on a study on AV production. And within that, there's a whole bunch of user cases that describe both video and audio. And then we've devised some requirements that Lola will go on to speak to in a bit. But this stuff takes time. And it's going to take us a little bit of while to get these things through. So we won't even see the standards really being finalized till mid probably this year, and then those implementations are going to take more time to come through into next year and beyond. And even then, there's no guarantee that we're going to get everything we want. So what have we been looking at? These are the kind of key user cases that we've explored. You'll see here that there's a mix of audio and video. There's audience services, intercom solutions for those of you interested in kind of comms. There's compressed video, uncompressed video, contribution, and a whole bunch of other things like streaming events using airborne relays and other bits and pieces. But not all of those are going to be the ones that deliver straight away. So these are the ones that we think are going to be really important to us. So the big kind of audio ones around live audio and around live events. In video, we're really looking at the kind of compressed, where we do radio cameras and things like that, and how we cover these things, but also how we manage devices on these new types of IP network. So that gives us all of these kind of big questions that we're focusing on. There's a lot more detail behind this, a lot more figures behind this, but I'm just kind of glossing over it to kind of give you the background work here. But we've got things like, high bandwidth support. We want open IP broadcast standard support, so things like AES 67, things like 2110. We want really high quality of service. We're really concerned about synchronization. More so perhaps than latency, and the reason being that you can engineer around latency if everything's synchronized, but if you've got latency drifting all over the place, it's really hard to kind of engineer that out. And then we're also looking at audio for radio mics in ear monitoring. And then what do the networks really look like that are going to support these services? So we'll talk about non-public networks. This is the MPN abbreviation you can see, and you'll also see PLMN there, which is public land mobile network, which is a technical way of saying the service you get from your mobile network operator. And we know that different types of networks will work in different ways and will work differently depending on the type of environment that you're working in. So if you're working in a news environment and contribution, then you'll probably be on the public network using a PLMN. You may be using some sort of traffic prioritization, slicing, or parts of the network, all the way up to where you may own and deploy your own SANPN, a standalone non-public network. And you shouldn't be too scared of that, because actually we're seeing these types of things arrive in a backpack or relatively small devices. So when we talk about running your own network, I'm not talking about a national network, I'm talking about a network in a box type solution. I'm going to go past that one, but I'm just briefly going to talk about some of the work that we've been doing to kind of test some of this out. So last year at IBC, some of you may have seen that we got together with a number of broadcasters from across Europe. Mario was involved, Matt was involved, and a whole bunch of other broadcasters. We did some tests and trials, really just on using things like 5G, but also things like AI in production, some cloud-based production techniques using 5G to control lighting and these different types of network models. And this work's continuing, so we're doing some more work on that this year, both on live sports production and on other types of networks. And if you want to get involved in that, then Mario, Matt, and myself can speak more about that. Large project that we're working on that's European Commission funded. This is 18 partners working with us in order to kind of really test out some large workflows, one around live audio production, one around studio camera environments, because the studio camera environment is probably one of the most challenging environments. But then when you marry that alongside the audio production requirements of a live audio stuff, these are the really challenging places that we're looking at. So we're hoping to do some tests and trials around that over the next few years, but we're also over the next year or so. But we're really starting to concentrate now on what the networks look like, what the data being carried over those networks look like, and what that means for both audio and video. But we're also publishing some work. So a number of us were involved in publishing this EBU report on how we might use 5G for professional media production and contribution. Again, covers both audio and video user cases. For some reason, my slides got slightly out of order, but I'll come back to this one, which is the 3 user cases we got in 5G records, which is the live audio production, multi-camera wireless studio, and live immersive production, which is the idea that you might have several cameras and microphone arrays around an event, and then you allow the audience to choose the viewpoint that they see the action from, and that is using some millimeter wave stuff. And then the cameras very much focusing on timing, synchronization, those issues that you have with multi-camera and media orchestration, and then the audio, which I'm sure Lola will talk about, which is where we're talking about different types of audio scenarios and how they all fit together. So that's it from me. It's a really quick gallop through a lot of the work that we've been doing, both within the UK, within Europe, and also internationally. I should just say 5G Mag's an international organisation, so we're starting to see the views from both sides of the Atlantic on how we might use these things in the future. And they do marry up. Some differences in some places, but hopefully if we all pull together, we'll get there. But the important message for me is that we work together as an industry to kind of identify our requirements and pull that through. So that's why it's really good to be able to kind of talk to you guys and have this discussion with you today. Lola, do you want to pick up on some of the more specific audio?
Yes, thank you, Ian. I also need to share a couple of slides. So please give me a second. Okay, now you see my screen? You see my screen now? Yes?
Yeah, I'm
there you go, Lola.
Yeah, we got it. We got it.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much, Ian. You brought us through mostly all the acronyms and names that we can see on this first slide of mine. During the chat that we had previous to the event, came out that many people in the community think that that audio has not been really involved in the 5G developments, or that it's happening, or the history is repeating, and audio is coming late, and all people are, let's say, concentrating on the video. Just want to just to mention that we started looking at the opportunities and the challenges of the 5G technology for audio almost 5 years ago. We started with national German founded project called PMSE, that's the program making special events, Next Generation, XG. And to be honest, the main driver and the motivation for doing that was what the spectrum, the spectrum pressure. The spectrum pressure coming from the cellular industry and from the that time already upcoming hype on the 5G technology. So you know that audio guys, the wireless microphones work on specialized RF solutions in the TV UHF band, and the pressure for that band is very high, both regional and also on a global level. So we said to ourselves, okay, we have to look and explore the 5G technology. In the worst case, we are going to lose the spectrum, so we are forced to use it. Can you, yes? And on the, let's say, in the best case, then we will find added value, better performance, and even maybe we can get rid of our spectrum access problems, because we will get the spectrum through the cellular technology. So after the first project, we had three main learnings back in 2018. The first one was that the technology, the 5G technology, was not yet there to satisfy the use cases that we have been looking for. Those were those live performance audio use cases. We learned that the spectrum issues remain with the 5G technology. It means that in order for the 5G technology to solve the spectrum access problems of PMSE, we have to, or the industry will need to completely rethink the business case and the business models. So if the industry is willing to change the way they have been working till now, which is like kind of content producers manage the spectrum, deploy the networks, operate the networks, have the full control, liability on the production process. Well, if they are willing to say, to give this out and to have this back in the form of a service level agreement with a mobile network operator, then, well, you may get rid of the spectrum problem. But in other case, no. So spectrum access problems remain in 5G. And the other thing we learned is that no matter what we think about it, 5G is a catalysator, it's a large and huge catalysator for all the trends that we observe in the media industry, industry involving production and distribution. So even if audio people are not looking at this at the moment, we have to stay on the ball, because these trends are moving to the audio production and they will be relevant. So we went on, and well, Ian has explained all the activities that we have been doing on the standardization, on the research projects, so I don't need to repeat that. What we also learned is that we have to, let's say, to broaden our scope. When we talk about audio production as a wireless mic manufacturer, you tend to stay on the capturing edge. That's the place where audio capturing wireless microphone in-ear audio devices are today, and well, we are looking for, let's say, an alternative to the existing radio technologies. But if we look at 5G only from that perspective, I think we are misunderstanding 5G, and it's not fair for the technology, because 5G is not really, let's say, the new radio access technology of the cellular world. It's much more than that. It brings like change the cellular technology in a way that it makes it compatible with the trends in the computing world. It makes it virtual network function virtualization compatible, software-defined network compatible. It makes it compatible for the cloud deployments. And these are very, very important factors that are also, let's say, we recognize them as trends in the audio production. You can put this all under this move to IP we are moving to IP. We want to have remote productions, even not only for the TV productions, which is the focus of this event today, but also if you look into the event, in the live events context, you see there is also more emergent use cases which try to do immersive new events where collaboration and remote production between events is required. So we see a lot of trends, and we see 5G as, well, let's say, just touching on those trends and giving a huge impulse to those trends. The requirements in the audio production are the same as we have in the legacy audio. It's reliability, it's determinism. It means that you want to have bounded performance. You want to control your network and control the performance. It's the need for IT integration, and it is the need for interoperability. We see that on the capturing edge, of course, you are used to that. It's like you cannot mix. Solutions are very specific. You cannot mix them up. There is no interoperability. This happens also, or remains, into the audio network, let's say, a context, even if there are some intense and let's say activities that try to bring this interoperability and compatibility in the audio network. For instance, the work on Milan, which is based on the AVB, audio video bridging protocols. We see there that there's this trend for open standards against proprietary solutions like Dante, which is, let's say, the most still the most used network technology in audio. And from our perspective, we think that we have to think in the whole value chain. What we want to deliver is in the future is a kind of let's say, wireless PMSC devices that are able to be integrated into the workflows in an easy way. If there's a move to IP, then the best thing to have is, if you can wish, is to have this IP native audio transmission from the device to the network, and you will need to be, let's say, open for the changes that happen on the radio access technologies. So 5G is an important aspect. We also have our, let's say, eyes open and have the Wi-Fi technology on the radar for the local area. This can be integrated into a 5G. We think that 5G is the catalyst for the future audio production. It's not completely necessary, but make many things easier, because it's a wide area network that can cover use cases from the, let's say, mobile use cases like the ENGs, and also if the technology evolves in the right direction, all these tier 1 events. So we continue on the 5G exploration, and I think that's enough from my side to set the scene, and then I will close and open the floor for the discussion. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Lola. Heather, did we lose you?
No, I'm right here. Over to you, Roger, and all of your speakers. So if you guys want to unmute yourselves, Mario, Jackie, Tom, Maria again, and Matt, Ian.
Great, and everybody else, if you can mute. I guess, Tom, we'll just sort of start with you. And thanks, Lola, that was great. And thanks, Ian. Great background. And it's interesting how much is going on that maybe some of us in audio production aren't even aware of in terms of standards development. But the other thing has really been the accelerated use of first bonded cellular and now 5G in video production. And I guess, Tom, you know, how significant do you think this sort of trend toward multi-camera production with wireless cameras is, and how will that impact the requirements for audio?
Yeah, I think this pandemic has really accelerated that. You know, we've seen, you know, when the PGA did their first event, that was the first live sports during the pandemic, and that was done with 5 bonded cell packs. So right off, the move was to go to something that basically could provide the freedom that wireless technology you know, provides, and 5G with the high bandwidth and low latency that's been touted is really looked at by many of the production groups as the holy grail. This is giving them everything that they want in a production. High bandwidth, so you can get lots of signals together, low latency, so you can do live productions. So really, from a very high level, there's a lot of focus on the promise of 5G. And now that many of the media companies have decided to focus on transforming their production processes into the cloud, 5G is looked at as, you know, the means that they will connect their facilities together, both with fiber and with 5G, because 5G again has proven to be the savior in providing them the connectivity and freedom to go wherever the event is. And so I think there's really this focus from the management side of the media companies to really explore 5G and what it holds for production. And you know, that now creates the problem for the engineering technology teams of those production, you know, production entities to figure out how to get there, because the 5G network is still very new. You know, it's really only been deployed a couple of years. And as Ian's slide showed, many of those standards are still being developed and tested. So I would expect that as we see more and more of the standards, release 17 introduces ultra low latency, which many are looking as a way of controlling the networks in very quick fashion. So I think once you start seeing the rollout of those types of technologies, the network itself will become much more flexible and be able to address many of the concerns that we've had about latency and signaling, of how do you return a signal to someone that you've received the data from them. So this is really, as Lola said, you know, experimentation. I think, you know, many people have started the experimentation. And BBC and BT Sport have been very active in that the last couple of years. We in the US have done a few, but it's more been market focused, where we're just going through the motions of demonstrating what the network is capable of doing, but the network really isn't been configured to handle that kind of traffic yet. So they've been just one-off, very highly focused, specialized test. So yeah, I think in the next maybe 2 years, as these standards become more established and software and hardware is deployed, I think you're going to see an acceleration of that, you know, the progress of moving traditional workflows into the network.
Well, and that's the, you know, this interesting question about cloud production, because it does sort of go hand in hand with cloud production, which is sort of, we're moving it up into the cloud anyway. So then it's sort of cloud adjacent. want to come back to the latency thing in a minute. We said we wouldn't talk too much about the latency, but Lola, you have, and I've read the white paper, you guys have, in the right circumstances, tested low latency networks on a single NPN non-public network site with pretty astonishingly low latency times, in the couple milliseconds, right?
Yes, right. But well, when you say we have tested it in a non-public network, I think this is a quite big way of saying that. It wasn't a non-public network. It was like a dedicated setup with one microphone and one in-ear device. And we saw that, yes, I mean, I will say that ultra reliable low latency, this keyword has already fallen. It's important. Originally in 5G, this was designed for, let's say, for a kind of small packets that have to go through the network, small packets, and be very fast. But the important things are this kind of deterministic behavior. It's more what you find in the standards under the name of time-sensitive communications. Is that you really can configure your network in a way that is going to deliver to you bounded latency, of course, ultra low for the application during the operation time. And this is based in release 16 and 17 in the integration of the 5G system with time-sensitive networking. And there's also additional work where they try to deliver this in a native way in 5G. What we learn is that there's still, I mean, we focus on the latency. Synchronization was not delivered in this. If you read the white paper, it's done by heart. It's through an Ethernet cable. So it's really a labor and test environment, and the results are promising. I don't say they are not promising, but it's like we are
got a ways to go.
Take more aspects into account, yes.
Yeah, well, and I think we agree in video production, we're really much more concerned with synchronicity. But the point is that the low latency can, under the right circumstances, ultra low latency can be pretty impressive. But I want to get back to the use cases. And Mario, I think if I can kind of start with you, you guys use lots and lots and lots of microphones, and increasingly you're looking, and particularly going into the Winter Olympics, covering lots of things with wireless cameras, or some sports with wireless cameras. And so do you see these use cases for 5G based microphones? Do you wish you had them now? And how much would you use them, and where would you use them?
Hello, Roger, and very nice to be here. The answer is a clear yes. We just see that this is it's a must. I think for live sports production. I think certainly what Jan was saying, tier 1, tier 2, we the broadcasting community, we do need 5G, and we need to leverage on that. As you're saying, we are currently, actually we'll start the next month tests in Beijing with our telecom partner and a few other partners for encoders and cameras and microphones. And I think it's really early stage of the 5G network, and it's even earlier stage of the encoding video and audio industry. And if these two worlds, they don't merge, then I think we can wait for the 6G, or we can wait for the millimeter wave, and the gap is still there. So what we see right now is with our telecom partner in China, yes, we do manage to control now the network. Exactly what fully aligned with what Lola was saying. This idea of deterministic networks, deterministic behaviors, it's fundamental until we'll get the ultra low latency, yes, I think we are there with our partner, doing a few tricks, but and I'm talking about public networks, but we still see the gap. The gap is still here when it comes to encoding in the modems. When we talk about specifically about wireless cameras and wireless microphone. So this gap is here. I don't think we'll be able to close this gap by the time of the Olympics, but okay, fine. The world is done with progress using small steps. I see that some of our partners, they are really super engaged and willing to come up with prototypes to test both encoding, both in the network side, but the gap is still there. But bottom line is, for all the normal operational aspects that we follow, that we need to go through on a big event like the Olympics, or like I don't know, FIFA World Cups, or NFLs, or Eurovision Song Contest, I think we all suffer the same problem. The amount of devices is reaching a certain level that we do need 5G networks, and we in OBS actually we are looking for 5G public networks. We are not even yet talking about the non-public networks. I think it will be the next step. But this gap we are now trying to overcome ahead of the Olympics. We are not doing massive, or will not be doing massive. Actually, we don't know if we can do it. That's the first big question. We'll be doing some tests now, a second wave of tests in October, to take the final decision. And we are now working with our partners to try to overcome these gaps. But I think the most important thing is really, and I think it's an important learning for the communities. If we don't work hand in hand with our telecom partners, we will not overcome this, because we, for tier 1, tier 2 live production environments, we do need to design the networks. Yes, we need release 17, we need release 18, we need millimeter waves networks, but a standard network will never be able to meet the service level that a tier 1, tier 2 event needs. And for this, we spent already a good 1 year designing the networks for with our partners there. So that's, I think, the most important takeaway. The second important thing, I think Lola mentioned it as well, and I think it's very important. Yes, we do want and we do need standard components. We cannot cope with dedicated, private, ad hoc, bespoken solutions, because these will never be able to make the business case.
Yeah.
So yes, we do need to go on a standard approach, as the telecom guys they did.
Yeah. Matt, do you get along with your telecom partners on the production side?
Yeah, well, we're quite lucky because, yeah, we own a mobile company as well as part of the group. And that's where, we're really trying to use that to drive through the industry. And it's good is to come in and understanding, the commercial aspects and where this opportunity, or this vertical industry, where that opportunity lies, and how the mobile operators see it. And I think there was a lot of discussion, and in fact, the media and broadcast industry, probably, I would say, of all the things that we're looking at, is probably the most well-defined use cases across the industry verticals, because there was things that we were doing with 4G that we loved, which is, obviously freedom of movement, the ability to be able to, go somewhere quickly, lowering costs, enabling remote production. And the only thing that we didn't have there was the capability to be able to sort of guarantee that we weren't going to lose the audio and video because of it being impacted by the consumers. There was a single network. And then going into 5G and all the work that Ian and his team and the others into the standards and Lola, then we knew that we wanted to have some way of doing that. And at the beginning it was okay. The panacea for this is the ability to do network slicing. And as we come in and we see deployments develop, from a techno-economic perspective, a mobile network can only be rolled out based on a consumer offering. That's where the money comes in to mobile. So everything is tuned for maximum capacity for downlink, which is perfect for the consumers and actually benefits sport, because it benefits people in stadiums in area of high density. What we need to look at now is how do we take it to the next step to enable, then if I take myself back, me as a broadcaster to address some of those. And that's when we come into the non-public networks. And when I talk about non-public networks, there's a little bit of disparity in terms of how the mobile networks talk about things and how the broadcasters do. But basically, for me, the way I see a non-public network is anything that has been changed or bespoke, or some configuration that means I get a different experience from going to buy a SIM card from an operator and putting it into my encoder and doing the same as I would with 4G. So that comes in, and that's why we're looking at different things. Network slicing is quite a long way off, and some of the hurdles of deploying a standalone network, 5G network. So at the moment, everybody has what's called non-standalone. So we use 5G new radio and then a 4G core. For all of the advanced features that we need as broadcasters, that needs to come from when we have a 5G core, and that's taken some time. Then we need to look at the ability to be able to do network slicing, and for a mobile operator, they need to have enough return on investment of being able to industrialize that process. Then they can start to address broadcasters. So that's why we're quite keen on what could we do now as a broadcaster, and it's one of the things we're looking at. Ian mentioned the IBC accelerators, and that's what can you do now to go and make this a broadcast grade network. And one of them is a private network. So you go with, we talk about 5G in a box, and you take you have to get some spectrum in the UK. That's Ofcom, the regulator. Shared spectrum that you can license for an event, and then that allows you to configure the uplink and the downlink, so you can swap the ratios. So you can say you have 4:1 uplink, when it's normally 4:1 downlink, and then you really do have all of the processing there. You can look at some of the edge compute capabilities, which we've discussed. And then at the back of that is where you enter your cloud network, the internet, and private fibers back to your production studios. So I think that's where we'll start to see, and technically, I'm not talking about the commercial viabilities, but that's available now. A broadcaster could get that working with partners. So I think we have a very long way to go, and we will get there. But we need to look at what we can do as a broadcast industry that isn't just sat back relying on a business case from a mobile operator, because that might be a long way to come. And it might be driven by things like healthcare and education. A lot of the capabilities that those industries need really do align quite well with ours.
Ian, you want to jump in here on this one? I mean, how does this work when we talk about these big events? Is this renting a slice? Is it?
I think a lot of it's going to depend on who you are and where you are. So as broadcasters, we've been dealing with spectrum for, well, 100 years in the case of the BBC next year. So we've got good relationships with Ofcom. We've got good relationships with the regulators. We really understand what we're doing. And when we put on an event, we might outsource it, we might do it ourselves. We kind of know the process that you have to go through to kind of obtain spectrum and all the process around that. That's really unusual for vertical. Most kind of private 5G networks are designed for hospitals or factories or stuff like that, where they're just not used to having that. So we're a little bit scary, I think, to a lot of the mobile network operators, but also the back end suppliers as well. Because when we've looked at buying kit from some of the big manufacturers, they've said, well, no, we're not going to sell it to you because you're going against our main business model, which is the mobile network operators, and you might want to buy £100,000, but you spend £100,000, but actually these guys are spending millions, and we don't want to undercut that model. But there's a whole bunch of tier 2, tier 3 vendors under there now that are kind of coming out and literally, as I say earlier, kind of being able to kind of provide network in the box. I think Singtel did some stuff with Ericsson last year, and there was some publicity about that a couple of weeks ago. We're just about to buy our own internal bit of kit within the BBC to do some testing based on N77 spectrum, which is actually spectrum that we've already had partial access to, and we can get on sort of a year-long lease from Ofcom. But that won't be any more than almost a single cell. But you can kind of start to imagine that if I can put that cell in a small venue, I can start to connect cameras and microphones and start to kind of really test the workflow.
So let me understand that, Ian. So that's a 5G cell site that you're operating in a band that's available for broadcast.
Yeah.
Production.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's different ways. There are a lot of the adjacent bands that we've already got permission to use sit adjacent to 5G bands, and there's also even when you look at the UHF stuff, there's some pushes in some areas to kind of explore the sub 700 network that we currently use for DTT and radio mics for some 5G applications, probably point-to-point links and things like that. So there's capabilities of doing that. It's just about the appetite, and actually it's more about actually how do you get enough people who are willing to try it. The other thing we can look at is, we tend to operate a lot in our studios. They tend to be Faraday cages. They tend to be quite RF isolated, and with some of the kind of higher frequency, the millimeter wave stuff, you can actually envisage a world where you can put these separate networks in different studios and not have to worry too much about what's going on, because it just won't go through the studio walls. So there isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all thing. There will be a solution that fits on the back of a truck that you'll take out if you're on a news gathering, and there'll be a solution that if you're building a studio facility that you might want to put in a campus network or stuff like that. And then how you integrate that with the mobile network operator, whether if you're the BBC, you might be big enough and have enough resources to be able to manage it yourself. But I do see that there's a world of almost this kind of stuff as a service. So I can ring somebody up and say, right, I want this amount of bandwidth, this amount of spectrum, and I want this amount of capability, and they'll liaise with Ofcom or the mobile network operators, and they'll turn the dial and say, right, here's 100 megabits from location A that you've got for 3 weeks, similar to really what we do with satellite at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this new business model, Matt and I have spoken about this at length, these new business models need to start emerging. But the only way we're going to get traction on those is actually continuing the discussion, because there's a whole bunch of things where you can look at these technologies and go, slicing, hey, that's great, I can have a piece of network slicing just dedicated to me, and that might work. But for a lot of organizations, well, actually I only want that spectrum in that one place for a week. I don't want to pay for a whole network slice of spectrum that covers the whole of the UK or the whole of Europe. I just want it in that one venue for a very.
You might think you wanted that, though, if you were a news gathering.
If you were news, yeah.
Until you find out what it's going to cost,
exactly.
Think, let's do that.
You're paying for spectrum you're not using in wild areas of Finland, where actually everything's going on in Helsinki. Or similarly, what does a slice look like? Is it if I turn up and then BT turn up and ITN turn up and Sky Sports turn up, are we all competing for the same slice? Do we share a slice? There's a whole bunch of commercial and other things that just really need to be thought through in that space, right the way through from news gathering all the way up to high-end tier 1 events as well. It's not as simple as just ticking a box to say, yeah, we know how we're going to do this.
Jackie, Ian mentioned some of the advantages of millimeter wave and higher frequencies. Broadcasters have had a little trouble getting used to that and seeing the downside maybe more than the advantages. What, as this technology evolves, what do you think?
Well, I think that as not just this technology evolves, but as all wireless technology evolves, because the use case for everything is exploding so rapidly, billions and billions of devices a year, that people are going to have to get used to the thought of coordinating spectrum in different ways. And if you go to higher frequency, lower power, for example, then you can take advantage of location coordination because your systems are not physically reaching each other. If you take advantage of digital methods that then allow you to coordinate with time via TDMA, then you're doing time coordination, and the time and the space coordination is very important, and it gets easier and easier to do when you go up into the higher frequencies. So some of the people on the call will know why I was grinning when Ian mentioned you could put a millimeter system in studios and then be able to use the system studio to studio without interference. Yes, we know that absolutely works, and it's a great way to do wireless. However, the audio industry often has ended up this way, and that is that we benefit from, we're like the little remoras that ride along with the sharks. We are benefiting right now from a huge explosive growth in on just the general consumer device and wireless side of things. The money that drives the R&D and the standards and everything and the devices that will be available is coming in right now, and the spectrum crunch that we've talked about is something so much bigger than the small slice of spectrum difficulty that we're seeing in a broadcast and TV production standpoint, that the tools to be able to manage that spectrum are being developed, and we'll be able to take advantage of them. We'll be able to take advantage of AI that then creates cognitive decision-making that determines who's working here and what type of device is it, and how can I prioritize to maximize for this ultra reliable low latency system, or how can I have 20 people in a house playing games on their Wi-Fi or their Bluetooth or their phones, and how can I prioritize how they can be working in a room or in a time slot, and all those things are happening now. So to think that we wouldn't be able to take advantage of them for our own much smaller, much more niche specialized application would be, it would be a loss actually, because it's just too wonderful to think that you could actually apply those technologies to making our jobs easier and to making our productions sound and work better and deliver our customers a much better experience, much better, because the camera is one thing, but being able to create an actual realistic immersive sound environment is another level. So.
Well, and that's my concern is I see the cameras, I see the trajectory of the growth of standards-based wireless, well, not standards-based, but telecom-based wireless cameras. I see that growing explosively. I think we'll have sports that are just covered with 5G cameras. It's just going to happen. And yet, what I see is the legacy audio workflows. I see a microphone tethered to that camera, either by conventional wireless or by a cable, or I see somebody with an embedder embedding into a wireless pack. and that doesn't really cover the complexity, I think, of large events. So that's that's the thing I see is our audio solutions. We've kind of the last few minutes we've just been talking about 5G in general, but our audio solutions gonna catch up, and are we gonna see belt packs? And if we have an 8-channel ORTF array or similar, like Mario's using, they must have 100 of them in Japan, can we have a pack that supports that microphone?
I think what you're seeing, Roger, is actually the maturity of a relatively saturated market in the kind of bonded cellular space, because news gathering have leapt on that technology, and it was almost done independently of the mobile industry. So that whole world grew up with the best efforts network, really not even considering what the mobile industry was doing. They're just saying, actually, I've got a data connection here, let's bond it together and create a data connection and do that. What's changed with 5G is that the mobile industry has reached out to us and said, okay, well, what do you want from this network? So people like Lola and myself and colleagues have worked together to kind of feed in some of these high-level user cases. But the reality is we need more of that information, and the more as we start to kind of develop these tools and develop the user equipment that's going to kind of support these workflows, you know, they need to hear our voice. And that's why and it's really hard, because I spend half my life trying to explain to people who come from a telecoms background actually what's the difference between, you know, one camera and another, or why you need to have remote control of certain devices, whether those are, you know, speakers or in-ear monitors or radio mics. And it's just a thing, you know, they just don't understand why a radio mic would be different to a telephone call, because it's just not their world. So we have to really explain that to them, and that's what we've been doing. And I think it's really great now that actually alongside other verticals. So Jackie was saying, you know, there's really interesting stuff coming on in the XR and the VR world. We're following that. We're following the work that's going on in drones, in UAS stuff, because we're going to use that technology. We've worked really closely with our colleagues in medical imaging, because actually there's not that much difference between medical imaging and video imaging, except they want higher resolution at lower latency than we do. So all of these things we can work. We need to be a bigger voice than just a kind of, we were a big industry, as I said earlier, for a long time, but now we're just a small fish in a big pond. I mean, we need to kind of work together to get there.
We do, though. I mean, Jure and Sennheiser and others really do add some special sauce in terms of the audio side, in terms of the packaging.
And they're contributing as well. Sony, Shaw, Sennheiser all been part of the conversations.
Well, I mean, Lola, do you see this as something that will have a 5G based body pack for a lav? Do you see that as something that's we're going to see in the next couple of years, or again for surround microphone, 8-channel surround microphone? Are we going to see those solutions productized?
I think if the community wants to see this, we are going to see it. I mean, we don't see it now because I think let's say the questions for that is not that big yet. We consider that broadcast is a large industry. For the mobile cellular technology, we are a small vertical. We need to, as Ian said, we need to find the synergies with the other verticals in order to make the case for the economies of scale that will bring these chipsets that make our applications possible. I mean, when you think about a wireless solution, you always need, you need the chipsets, you need that the technology fulfills the requirements of your application, you need a spectrum. And these economies of scale, I don't think, I mean, from the discussion that we have been hearing from the mobile industry, well, they ask what we want, they have their ears open, but they are not telling us, okay, we are going to do these 2 more pins in the silicon because you need them. No, we need to find something that fits several industries. And I think this is possible. I think we will see this first in the ENG space. And I think that, well, I would like to see, I really like what Jackie has said. I'm very fond of you, Jackie, because you have touched on this, let's say, additional aspects that come together with the technology of 5G that that can make it really really happen. I think the audio community should be more explorative and go forward and make then together with Mario, OBS, and Ian all the tests and trials. See what are the limits of the technology and what is needed to be added.
Well, okay, fair enough. Well, Aaron, seeing as how you're here, just thought we might get your thoughts. This is obviously something that in the background, Shure has done some research and studied. And do you see sort of deploying 5G solutions? And you know, we've seen this thing where it's not one size fits all anymore. It's all kinds of different wireless solutions using all kinds of different technologies and bands. And do you know, how much do you see this as part of the future of leveraging 5G technology?
It's a big question, Roger. I mean, we would. So, you know, to Lola's point, there's a lot that's possible. And Ian mentioned about this. I mean, to me, the common thread of everybody on this phone call is we have to invent the real, right? The producers dream up whatever they want to do on broadcast and tier ones, and then we have to figure out how to make it come true. At the end of the day, it has to work. I was talking to a good friend of ours that we work with routinely, high-profile audio guy here in the U.S., and he made the very obvious statement to me that the pro audio world has a very long memory for when stuff doesn't work. And so, you know, Ian, those first pictures of that analog rigs and you know, from wherever decade that was, it wasn't that long ago that wireless audio wasn't a guarantee for, you know, radio quality link. Because up until, you know, 10, 12 years ago, I would go out and talk to major customers and they would blankly look at me in the face and say, if I didn't have to use wireless, I still wouldn't. But they do. They don't have a choice, right? But now, fast forward, just with you know, largely conversion from analog signaling to digital signaling, you look at those same customers in the face, and they're like, I've stopped worrying about wireless audio for microphones largely, and that's a big deal for this industry now. You know, that's all been done within this fairly, you know, to Lola's point, small vertical of our own industry. We weren't relying on telecoms or Google or the cloud or anybody else to make that work. There's pros and cons with that, obviously. At the end of the day, up until today, I think there's more pros than there have been cons, because we're not dependent or under anybody else's thumb. And up until just in the last 10 to 15 years, we didn't really worry about spectrum at all, right? This is our biggest problem. So can 5G help the spectrum equation? I think probably to a degree. I have big questions, you know, about the economics of it. Ian, you rattle off a bunch of, you know, scenarios in there, but, you know, I kind of learned this in the white spaces time. You know, I sat on that IEEE 802.22, and we were in meetings with Google and Larry Page and Motorola and Dell and Intel. Those guys play big. They don't, you know, they get big dollars and they got to get big returns on those dollars. They don't bet small.
No, I'll explain just in a second.
So that's why I think the telco part of 5G is a big new factor to our industry in terms of, to your point, Ian, they might be asking us, what do we want? But if we tell them, are they going to give it to us? And then at the end of the day, somebody has to pay for it on site that day or that week or that month or whatever. And that's the thing that our industry is probably pretty used to that we don't buy spectrum, we don't pay for it on a, I mean, some users in Europe, you know, do licensing different than we do here in the US, but you're not shelling out billions of dollars to put on whatever. So I think there's a lot of questions online about the economics. Yes, everybody's gonna be doing R&D work. Sennheiser's doing it, we're doing it. I'm sure Sony's doing it to a degree. I always look at it, you know, in my time, it's always a race to get the most, not the perfect solution, particularly in broadcast. I've learned this. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you got to be able to rely on it. Even if it has some warts, you can have workarounds on the warts, but it's got to have, they got the same problems every day. And I just think that's the biggest unknown about 5G is what can you rely on? Because dollars talk at the end of the day. If somebody comes in and wants to, like the BBC says they've licensed X, Y, and Z at Wembley for a week for whoever, Eric Clapton or the Who, and then somebody else comes in with more dollars, that better be a pretty good contract for you not to get sold out from under you for that spectrum. So I think like everything else in the broadcast quality world, we got to kind of tiptoe our way through the prototypes and the trials and the whatever. And if I had the crystal ball, I'd probably get on a plane to Vegas right now, as far as where it's all going to shake out. But the last thing I'll say is I think it's a two-edged sword here with regard to UHF versus 5G. I can tell you, those of you who don't sit in standards bodies around the world in things like ITUR working groups, they're ready to chop us up into pieces and feed us to the wolves for UHF access.
Yeah.
So to me, there's a delicate balance to play here between how much we're prophesizing 5G is going to solve all PMSC problems and trying to hang on to the UHF as long as we can. Because at the end of the day, UHF, where the whole business is. And, Sennheiser will tell you the same thing. It's the non-broadcasters that create all those sales to put all that R&D money into the high tier one type products. So we can't just design tier one stuff and have it not work for, the mass tier 3, 4, 5 events that you folks don't even do. So that's the other end of the economic part. Plus, it's a political thing. We need to be careful not to jump out of the UHF boat into a 5G boat that's not a boat yet, I guess is my point.
May I jump in? Because Aaron, you touched on very important points. I started my part telling that we learned from the very beginning that 5G is not the solution for the spectrum problems. I mean, when you start thinking 5G is the solution for the spectrum problems, is that you give away the way we work now. This is a totally different business model that we haven't explored yet. And maybe there is no business there for us. We don't know the economic point of that. This is totally unclear. And I think that this is true. This is an elephant in the room that when we prophesy that 5G is going to be the solution, we are then putting danger and threat on our current status quo. So it's a hard thing, because I think we cannot ignore the evolution that it's happening, and this evolution and these trends, in my opinion, they don't have to do with 5G. 5G and the cellular industry is also going through these trends of decoupling, open standards, software-defined networks, virtualization, decoupling, ownership of assets. If you look on all these all-RAN activities, this is also a danger for all the Ericsson, Huawei's, and Nokia's. I mean, what you want is open interfaces. So I think this is really the core. And then I will prefer to have a world for broadcasters and PMSC where we have this decoupling of a spectrum and technology. We don't need to have this all together under an MNO. This is why I like what Jackie said about spectrum management. And you guys in US, you have the CBRS system. So you have the technology for doing localized spectrum access and localized spectrum management. Then you can see and decide which is the best technology for your application, which will be a question of the price point. And I see in the chat there is a comment on this. This is not only about the MNOs, but also about the chip manufacturers. You need to have the price point for the technology, and then you can have access to a spectrum and do your use cases. Of course, there are some use cases like this ENG when you want to have the mobile connectivity. Either you have UHF spectrum, which is globally available, and this is the way we work now, or we have a real global mobile network operation. But then the question is 5G really going to be everywhere where we need it? Because this is not our decision. This is the decision of the MNO that deploys the network under his own commercial needs.
I want to just narrow down one thing, and then I want to answer the chipset question. But I think there is a use case that I don't think anybody can ignore. And that is where we are using 5G cameras to cover an event that we can't cover with conventional wireless cameras. We can't cover with hardwire cameras. We're covering skiing, or we're covering motor sports, or whatever. Mario's nodding his head.
Yes.
And what we're left with is, without audio solutions, we have no audio.
Okay.
So it's too far to get the camera-based receiver to pick up the microphone, and the camera is wireless because it's too far to drag or too hard to drag the cable. So we're gonna have these workflows, and right now we're like the three monkeys. We're just ignoring the fact that there is not a complementary audio workflow to work with all the wireless cameras we're having. And I think that's Mario's problem, and that's the problem that I see more and more. And the question is, are we going to have a solution for that, or are we just going to have bad, we're going to have no audio because we're covering it with cameras? We're going to have only the audio that we can tether to the camera. That's one of the fundamental questions which I think we're facing right now, which is separate from what Aaron's talking about. Does 5G replace UHF? No, obviously it can't do everything UHF does. But also, we've lost the 700, we've lost the 600. Someday somebody's going to turn the TV transmitters off, and we're going to have trouble hanging on to the bit we've got left. Over here.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at that. I think what we're facing, at least from the US viewpoint, is our productions are still very traditional and the staff are really behind on the technology front. When you look at this move to IP, it's only in the last couple of years that IP's really made its way into the broadcast side of things with Dante and AES-67. When you look at AES has been around for a decade, and it's only just recently that people have really started to see the benefits of it. So I think it's going to start accelerating. The pandemic has helped push a lot of that forward, but until manufacturers get users asking for the features, it's really hard for manufacturers to just go out and build something without really knowing that there's a market. So I think on our side as a technology evangelists, we have to get out there and really get to the users and make them aware of what this technologies, and it's not just 5G, it's IP networking, what the benefits offer. And yeah, I think that's really one thing that we on the marketing and technology evangelist side have to do a better job of.
Can I make a small comment?
Absolutely.
I fully agree. I think with what you say, you know, if we don't put in our mindset that audio workflows, they need to be designed from the very beginning, in parallel with video, in parallel with data, then we'll always face this problem with audio. That's point number one. Point number two, I think, you know, my background, by the way, is telecoms, and I spent a fair amount of time working for a mobile network manufacturer. And one thing is, right now, I believe that we as broadcast industry, we are in a learning curve, which is fair enough. And honestly, I don't think we know what we need to ask from a mobile network operator when it comes to 5G. Maybe we don't know what we need to ask for a 4G network as well. So if we don't know what we need to ask, the business case will never materialize, never. Because yes, our industry, the broadcasting, it's smaller compared to, you know, to the mass market of a 5G, of a mobile network operator. That's for sure. So we better start learning what we really need to make our production workflows, be it live, be it sports, I don't know, entertainment, ENG, audio, whatever. But we need to customize, and we need to understand what we really need from a mobile network operator and what we need from 5G or what we need from Wi-Fi 6. Because if we take the wave, which is kind of normal for time being, but if we take the wave of 5G marketing, then we just hit the wall. And I will give you a couple of examples. You know, everybody talks when it comes to 5G on gigabits per second, gigabits per second, gigabits per second. Guess what? When I start asking, I have 10 cameras and I want 90 megabits per camera, which is really not a big request if I want to do UHD in a place, in a closed environment, the best mobile network operator that is telling me, no way, you cannot get this. Or you can get it, but hey, give me a lead time of 1 year. Obviously, there is no business case here. But what I believe the industry, and I think that's the reason why these forums, they are really important, is to share knowledge, experience, to be able to approach a mobile network operator with and make the business case happen. And I can tell you that some of our services that we offer to our clients, yes, they are bespoke networks. You know, we spend maybe 3 years, 4 years designing them. And I can tell you that our telecom operators, yes, they make money. They make money, and we get money from our clients because we deliver value, I hope. And I give one example. When it comes to 5G and audio, there is a fantastic thing that unfortunately, we still struggle quite a lot when it comes to big events. And it's not only tier 1 or tier 2 events. That is, if we have audio over 5G, it means audio over IP. It means that I can easily give content of microphones to my clients that otherwise they will not get it. And this will enable them to personalize their production, to be closer to their end users. And yes, I think there is a business case for this. But I think with these forums, we really need to learn, and that's fine. The 5G is new. We have some hurdles to overcome, that's fair enough. And it's important that we share these experiences because yeah, 5G, I don't think it will solve all the problems, but it certainly will help. And I think we just need to make most out of it. That's it.
Great, great. Ian. You're
just
dying
to
to speak.
Yeah, no, just to echo that. I mean, I got fed up in the early days of when we started to talk about this, of going on panels and people asking me the same question over and over. And that question was, how can we make money out of the broadcast industry? To which my reply was, well, actually, the only way you'll make money from us is if you can save me money. You know, so if the MNOs kind of changed their attitude of looking at everything as a cash cow, sorry to those of you from the MNOs, but you know, as with all of these technologies that come along, they're only going to be widely adopted if they're either better or they're saving us money, or we can do more for less, or we can do interesting things. And yes, I know there's a load of challenges, and there's been some debate going on in the chat around kind of yeah, this is a really early technology, and I think actually it hasn't done itself any favors. And I think Aaron mentioned it earlier when he was talking about, you know, early technologies. I know in the US, for instance, I was sat in a bar in Washington with somebody who had an iPhone 4, and he said, look, I've got 5G from AT&T, and I'm looking at him going, well, there's no way that, you know, that is not 5G. You know, the mis-selling of the promise and the stuff like that. And the next iteration of 5G you'll see will be called 5G Advanced. So you're going to see that it's the next marketing term. There'll be hype around it, but all it's really doing is bringing the stuff that we've spent the last hour and a half talking about. You know, we are at the very early stages of this technology, and there's a whole bunch more to come. And as Jackie says, as the knowledge about radio, and as we break the existing laws of physics and invent new ones, things will change and get better. And that's what we're here to do. And let's be really honest, we're just moving ones and noughts around, all right? And some areas, does it matter in an IP world? And I'll get shot if I was saying this in a Spectrum conversation, but you know, does it matter if I'm moving them around on sub 600 or whatever, if I'm moving them around in millimeter wave? The most important thing to me is that those ones and noughts arrive at the right time in the right order. And so there's a kind of whole bunch of changes. You know, have we just done audio in sub 700 because we've always done audio in sub 700 because that's the spectrum we had available to us, because that was the broadcast spectrum? So we just have we created an element of, actually that's just the way we've always done it. I'm not saying that's right or wrong either way. I'm just asking the question. And so, you know, we've got to be more open to these kind of new workflows and these new ways of thinking. And I think that's all we're trying to do here, is explore them to get the answers that we need in order to carry on doing what we do. Jackie, you're up.
Yeah, so absolutely. And that's a really good point, because, you know, 5G it's a marketing term. It's well sold, and it's a race around the world to win the race for 5G. But the bottom line is it's not one thing. And these other companies and other providers have all already decided that they aren't going to stick to one thing. They've already said, well, I'm going to be a mobile phone, but I'm going to be a mobile phone, and I'm also going to have Bluetooth, and I'm going to have UWB, and I'm going to have Wi-Fi. And if my LTE service isn't what I want it to be, I'm going to use my Wi-Fi, or I'm going to operate in the 700 megahertz band or the 800 megahertz band, or maybe I'm going to operate in the 6 gigahertz band, or maybe I'm going to operate in 3.5. They jump around all over the place. They take advantage of what works best for the specific local conditions. And the wireless mic community has so far not really embraced that concept. They want to stick with the tried and true, which I understand. And I don't think 5G is specifically the solution for helping to solve the problem, to the question that Roger asked. You know, you've got these wireless cameras, what about the mics? But it is the concept of being able to stop doing what you've always done, because that's going to go away and it's going to be impacted. And right now it works well, but it's not going to work well in a short period of time, because everything else is the wave is going to hit, and your now reliable connections will not be reliable. So how are you going to deal with that? You're going to have to deal with it in the same manner that all the other wireless technology people dealt with, and that is to be willing to adopt multiple types of modulation schemes, multiple types of coordination schemes, multiple bands, multiple methods. And that's why 5G, whatever you're calling it now, or the new Wi-Fi networks, or the new super Wi-Fi coming up, that's how they're coping. They're coping by being flexible and using a lot of different tools. So I think that if there's one message that I think that the broadcast and production community needs to hear specifically about audio, is that you have to be willing to start considering using more flexible methods and locations and spectrum to be able to get this work done.
Well, great. Well, one final question from me, I think, is really I'll ask it to you, Ian. How far away from having, when we talk specifically about 5G, how far away are we from having devices that meet the use cases that Mario and I are jumping up and down about?
That's a really good question, and it's one Mario and I have batted around alongside others as well. And look, the reality is that it's not just the devices; it's about the network needs to be right to support those devices, and the commercial models need to be right to support the network that support those devices. So we've got 5G kit on the market already. I can go and buy some kit from a company like LiveView or whatever. But as I said, that's in the kind of bonded cellular and mature market. It's going to be and actually any bit of this kit, and the reason I'm making this really complicated is because actually anything we have is a whole chain of different bits of kit. So it's a microphone, it's an encoder, it's a modem, it's a whole bunch of stuff, and we're seeing Sennheiser doing some great stuff with microphones, but working with other companies that are providing the encoder and the modem. We're doing similar things with 5G. If I could go and buy a Grass Valley camera tomorrow that is capable of using JPEG XS, which gives me 100 megabit kind of IP output in SMPTE 2110. So then do I need an encoder? No, I just plug that straight into a modem. So this kit is going to be available to us, maybe a little bit of kind of Lego blocks, building blocks that we kind of put together, and eventually we'll settle on better configurations that we can then go to colleagues in Sony or Panasonic or Sennheiser or whatever and say, look, this is the form factor I want, and this is the way I need it to work for me. And hopefully we'll see that over the next couple of years, but it's going to be a long tail. It's not going to be next week, and it's not going to be, there'll be new stuff coming out all the time, which is great. It's a really exciting time to kind of explore all these new ways of working. And I think one thing is certain, that every time Mario does an Olympics, there's a new piece of underpinning technology that's coming along to support that. And what he does in Beijing is probably going to be, Mario, for me, it's probably going to be completely different to what you do in Paris and beyond. And that's why it's so exciting to kind of get involved and think about this stuff.
Yeah.
Just a small thing. I'm conscious about time. Fully aligned with what Jan said. For you, the audience today, we are right now developing and trying to come up with prototypes, and I think we are still far from a product. So maybe we can have some of those prototypes working well in Beijing next year, but they are still a prototype. So I think in terms of encoding, decoding, and modems, these to manage as well latency in our use case of live production, because that's really where we push the boundaries of all these chain. So I think it will take still a few fair amount of months. I would say years, maybe it's too much, but I think we will need those months to develop prototypes to make sure that they will work and they will meet our expectations. So, but we need to work and we need to start testing and learn. There is no other way.
Great. Well, thank you, Mario, and good luck next couple of months. Should be interesting. Thank you, Tom and Jackie and Mario and Aaron and everybody, Matt, Ian, Lola, really appreciate it, and all the rest of you who joined us this morning. Heather, thank you for organizing all this. This was a lot of fun. Turn it over to you.
Cool. Thank you again. Thanks for those, Roger, and all of our speakers. That was really, really interesting. If the people in the audience want to learn more about 5G, I suggest following some of our speakers today, because they are very, very involved in making these things kind of move forward and work. Also go to 3GPP and 5G Mag and see what those guys are doing there. Really lots of stuff, and as everyone said, it's early days.